The Power of Habit: Why We Do What We Do in Life and Business by Charles Duhigg, 2012. Part 1. The Habits of Individuals. You must first understand how habits work at the neurological level, for the habit loop is the key to changing any behavior. Duhigg introduces you to the story of Eugene Pauly, a man whose brain damage destroyed his memory but left his habits intact, revealing that habits are stored in a different part of the brain than conscious memory. The habit loop consists of 3 elements: a cue that triggers your brain to go into automatic mode, a routine that is the behavior itself, and a reward that tells your brain whether to remember this loop for the future. Over time, this loop becomes more and more automatic as cue and reward become intertwined until a powerful sense of anticipation and craving emerges. Understanding this loop is the first step to gaining control over your habits, because once you recognize the components, you can begin to change them. You must learn to identify the cue, routine, and reward that drive your habits, and then shift your routine while keeping the same cue and reward. Duhigg introduces the golden rule of habit change. You cannot extinguish a bad habit, you can only change it. To change a habit, you must keep the same cue and deliver the same reward while inserting a new routine. This requires what researchers call belief, the conviction that change is possible, which often emerges through community and social support. Alcoholics Anonymous works because it gives people a new routine to replace drinking, while providing the same social rewards and the belief that recovery is possible. You can apply the same principle to any habit by experimenting with different rewards to identify what craving your habit is really satisfying. Isolating the cue by looking for 5 specific factors: location, time, emotional state, other people, and preceding action, and then making a plan to insert a new routine. You must understand the power of keystone habits, which are habits that start a chain reaction, changing other habits as they move through your life. Duhigg introduces you to studies showing that people who start exercising regularly often start eating better, smoking less, and being more productive at work, even though no one directed them to change those behaviors. Keystone habits create small wins that transform how people see themselves, building confidence and structures that help other good habits take root. In business, keystone habits like making safety the top priority can transform an entire organizational culture, as seen in the turnaround of Alcoa under CEO Paul O'Neill. By focusing on a single keystone habit, you can trigger widespread change without having to attack every problem directly. The key is to identify which habits in your life have the power to start this cascade and to invest your energy in strengthening them. Part 2. The Habits of Successful Organizations. You must recognize that organizations have habits just as individuals do, and these organizational habits often determine success or failure more powerfully than any single decision. Duhigg tells the story of how Starbucks built a multi-billion-dollar company not just on coffee, but on a system of organizational habits designed to help employees exercise willpower and self-control. The Starbucks training program teaches employees specific routines to follow when they encounter difficult customers, transforming moments of potential conflict into opportunities for connection. This is willpower as a habit, and research shows that willpower is not just a skill, but a muscle that can be strengthened through practice. When organizations create institutional habits that support willpower, they empower their employees to make better choices even under stress. You see that great companies are not built on grand visions alone, but on the thousands of small routines that shape how people work together every day. You must understand that organizational habits can also create disasters, as seen in the case of the London ambulance service and the Rhode Island hospital medical errors. When habits become too automatic, they can blind people to critical information and prevent them from responding to new situations. Duhigg explains that this is the paradox of habit. They allow us to do things without thinking, but they also make it possible to stop thinking altogether. The key to healthy organizational habits is creating what researchers call accountability. where people are empowered to question routines when something seems wrong. In the medical setting, simple checklists and protocols that force people to pause and communicate have saved thousands of lives by disrupting dangerous automatic habits. You learn that the most successful organizations are those that balance the efficiency of habits with the flexibility to break them when circumstances demand. You must see how targeting keystone habits can transform entire companies, as demonstrated by the turnaround of Alcoa under Paul O'Neill. When O'Neill became CEO, he announced that his top priority was worker safety, a goal that seemed disconnected from the company's financial struggles. But safety became a keystone habit that required changing countless other routines: communication systems, reporting structures, maintenance schedules, and management practices. As workers learned to report safety concerns, they also learned to report inefficiencies and ideas for improvement. As managers learned to respond to safety reports, they also learned to listen to their employees about other issues. Within a year, Alcoa's profits reached record highs, and the transformation continued for decades. The lesson is that you can change everything by changing the right thing, and the right thing is often a keystone habit that forces other habits to realign around it. You must understand how crises can create opportunities for organizational habit change because they make old routines untenable and open the door for new ones. Duhigg shares the story of how the Philadelphia Eagles football team used a losing streak to overhaul their locker room culture, and how the London Underground, after the King's Cross fire, transformed its safety practices. When a crisis hits, the habits that once seemed essential are suddenly revealed as dangerous, and people become willing to embrace new routines they would have resisted before. Leaders who understand this can use crises as catalysts for positive change, channeling the urgency and openness into building better habits. The key is to have new routines ready to replace the old ones, because nature abhors a vacuum, and without new habits, the old ones will eventually return. Part 3. The Habits of Societies. You must recognize that social habits, the patterns of behavior that shape communities and movements, follow the same basic principles as individual habits. Duhigg tells the story of how the civil rights movement used the Montgomery bus boycott to create new social habits that eventually transformed an entire society. The boycott succeeded not just because of its moral righteousness, but because it gave people new routines, new ways of interacting, and new social structures that reinforced their commitment. Strong ties within friendship groups provided the initial motivation, but weak ties, acquaintances, and casual connections were what spread the movement to the broader community. Social habits like the weekly church meetings created the organizational infrastructure that sustained the boycott for over a year. You learn that movements are built on the same building blocks as individual habits: a cue that mobilizes people, a routine that structures their participation, and a reward that keeps them coming back. You must understand the power of weak ties and social networks in spreading habits through communities. Weak ties, the acquaintances you see occasionally rather than close friends, are surprisingly influential because they connect you to different social worlds and expose you to new information and behaviors. When you hear about a job opportunity from a weak tie, you learn something you would not hear from your close friends who know the same people you know. Similarly, when you see someone you vaguely know adopting a new habit, it feels more achievable because they are not that different from you. The Montgomery bus boycott spread through weak ties as people saw acquaintances participating and felt compelled to join. Organizations like Saddleback Church grew by deliberately creating small groups where weak ties could form and multiply. The lesson is that to spread a new habit, you need to create opportunities for people to see others like themselves doing it. You must recognize that habits can be engineered at the societal level, as demonstrated by the way Rick Warren built Saddleback Church into one of the largest congregations in America. Warren understood that spiritual commitment alone would not sustain attendance. He needed to create habits that would bring people back week after week. He designed small groups that met during the week, creating social bonds and routines that reinforced the Sunday experience. He created volunteer roles that gave people a sense of purpose and belonging, turning casual attendees into committed members. He used the power of fellowship to make church attendance a habit, not just a decision. The same principles apply to any organization seeking to build community. Give people specific routines that connect them to others, provide rewards that make them feel valued, and create cues that trigger participation automatically. When habits become embedded in the fabric of a community, they persist long after the original motivation fades. To show love and appreciation, like, share, and subscribe.